Donc, le monde de la culture vit présentement de grands bouleversements depuis l'explosion de l'économie numérique et aussi depuis l'apparition d'habitudes de consommation culturelle complètement nouvelles. Ces changements importants se sont produits rapidement, surtout depuis les derniers 20 ans à peine. Il y a seulement 22 ans, Microsoft lançait Windows 95 et donnait accès Internet au grand public. 2 ans plus tard, Google. Ensuite, iTunes, première version en 2001. YouTube arrive en 2005. Et ainsi de suite, et ainsi de suite. Pour la première fois cette année, les revenus issus du streaming ont dépassé les revenus des ventes physiques. Le téléphone intelligent ou la tablette remplace progressivement la télévision et même la salle de cinéma. Des prestations musicales dans tous les styles sont disponibles en ligne en tout temps. Donc, le monde de la musique de concert, maintenant, travaille à relever le défi pour optimiser son développement et sa mise en marché en tenant compte de cette nouvelle réalité. On ne peut plus aborder nos problèmes et nos enjeux de la même façon qu'il y a 10 ans et même qu'il y a 2 ans. Ça va très, très vite. Donc, l'économie numérique, les médias numériques et les réseaux sociaux doivent être bien compris et maîtrisés par tous les intervenants du monde des orchestres. Et heureusement, beaucoup de progrès a été accompli en cette matière un peu partout dans le monde. Nos panélistes vont partager avec vous leurs découvertes, leurs réflexions et leur expérience dans le domaine. Merci. So, now I switch to English for the rest of the panel. So I have a few experts in these matters. I will start with to my right, Gerald Mertens from Germany. Mr. Mertens was born in Lübeck in Germany in 1959. He studied law and participated in educational training for church music in Kiel for many years, and then he's also a legal associate with the German Orchestra Association from 1990 and onwards. He's a lawyer in Berlin, general manager of the German Orchestra Association, or DOV, since 2001. He's editor-in-chief of the magazine Das Orchester at Schott Music Mainz since 2001, also chairman of the association Netzwerk Junge Ohren. Is it okay?
Young Ears Network.
So, Young Ears Network, okay. Please welcome Mr. Gerald Mertens. So, Mr. Louis Heyneman from South Africa is a chief executive at the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra. He graduated in journalism and music. And in his student years, he became the editor-in-chief of the student newspaper, the Mati, and started his career as a music and art journalist at the Africans Daily, the Breughel. He's also the deputy editor of the Cat magazine, and in 1991, he was appointed the director of the Udo Meester Foundation for the Performing Arts. Under his guidance, more than 30 recordings of prominent South African composers and performers have been published under various South African and international labels. He is also chief executive of the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra since 2000 and published a book on the 100 years of symphonic music in Cape Town. So, Mr. Louis Heyneman. Barbara Haws from the United States is an archivist and historian at the New York Philharmonic since 1984. She has lectured extensively about the orchestra's past and curated major exhibition at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts or the London Barbican or the Cologne Philharmonics. She mounted the largest multimedia exhibition on the Philharmonic's history, which opened at the UBS Art Gallery in 2003. She has lectured at Bard College, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Breughel Club, as well as the New York Philharmonic's pre-concert talks. She became in 1995 the executive producers of the Philharmonic's special edition record label, which released award-winning and Grammy-nominated CD collections, including the 12 CD sets of the Mahler broadcasts. She has been an archival consultant also to many orchestras, and she has served as president of the Archivist Round Table of Metropolitan New York, and is a founder of the New York Archives Week and a board advisor to the Brooklyn Academy of Music Archives. That's a lot of. So please welcome Barbara Haws. And believe it or not, I skipped some parts of their biographies. Mr. Mark Bruwel from Australia is the president of Symphony Orchestra Musician Association, SOMA, in Australia. Mark holds the position of tutti oboe in the Opera Australia Orchestra. Having first joined the orchestra in 1988, Mark began his musical studies at the age of 12 and went on to complete a Bachelor of Music at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. In addition to the oboe, Mark played the violin and piano. He also performed with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and the Australian Chamber Orchestra, and is a passionate advocate for music education, in particular the use of new media platform for music education purposes. Mark is the elected president of the National Executive of the Symphony Orchestra Musician Association. Please welcome Mark Breughel. Okay. So we have a few interesting topics. I would start with, before that, I would ask our panelists to make a brief presentation. So we will start with Mr. Bruwel. Yeah? Okay.
Just get myself coordinated here. So, as Luke mentioned, yes, I'm an oboist with the Opera Australia Orchestra. I still hand make my own reeds. So preparing this presentation was also a journey of great discovery for me, for finding out just what Australian orchestras are up to with digital technology. I'm delighted to be here as one of 5 musicians from Australia representing the Symphony Orchestra Musicians Association, or SOMA. Try this. This slide shows you all the full-time orchestras in Australia and New Zealand and where we are all based. We currently have around about 564 members of SOMA, in fact. There are vast distances between the capital cities of Australia, so the explosion of digital technology and social media has provided great opportunities for orchestras to broaden their audiences, both in providing music and music education. 10 years ago, print media was a dominant force in Australian society. It was also one of the main platforms for orchestras to publicise themselves via news, articles, features or advertising. But the advent of social media and new broadcasting platforms has seen a rapid decline in print media's dominance. Smaller editorial teams and fewer full-time arts writers have rendered print media as a source of publicity for orchestras almost obsolete now. Orchestras are notoriously conservative beasts, so I think it is quite remarkable how quickly and extensively Australian orchestras have adapted. The odd financial crisis is also a great mother of invention. This slide shows the variety and extent of use of social media and digital technology now in Australian orchestras. Web pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are now all standard. Backstage also sees extensive use of programs such as ArtsVision and Opus for orchestral planning and resource management, and Tessitura for customer service and ticketing. Interestingly, 14 million Australians use Facebook, but only 2.5 use Twitter. Here are some examples of Australian orchestras' use of web pages and Twitter and Facebook. And I'll just re-juggle this. The rise of social media has also seen the demise of the 24-hour news cycle, replaced by a voracious appetite for constant news. Blogging has also led some orchestras to start creating their own news to feed this monster. The Adelaide Symphony's blog provides vital content for its Facebook page and Twitter feed. The Sydney Symphony's backstage news provides very useful value adding to its audience's concert experience. This, of course, is not the only digital technology being used. Today, I'll highlight 3: video conferencing, virtual reality, and projections. So, many orchestral musicians teach. It supplements our incomes, but most importantly, it passes our craft on to the next generation. We teach at home or perhaps a local school or conservatorium. With video conferencing, we can now go anywhere in the country. This is a student I gave 3 lessons to in regional New South Wales before she joined 40 other regional students in Sydney for a 3-day orchestra camp and concert at the Sydney Opera House. It was an amazing experience for all of us. This is the Australian Chamber Orchestra taking video conferencing to the next level, virtual reality. The Australian Chamber Orchestra's ACO virtual program allows students to play with the orchestra while being in a different city. This was them in the process of actually recording that. This is a pretty amazing shot. This is from the Adelaide Symphony's virtual reality project. Their Director of Marketing and Development writes, "We wanted to explore how the universality of the art form could be translated into a new medium. So we embarked on a pilot project with Jumpgate Virtual Reality to see what could happen. The filming was easy. They basically set up a dinner plate with about 20 GoPro cameras and took an audio feed that was set up for the broadcast. When we saw the footage translated into virtual reality, we were all literally blown away. As we wanted to share the project with as many people as possible and get their reaction, we worked with our principal partner, Santos, to have an activation in the foyer of their building in June of that year, and approximately 100 people a day came through. In 2016, we then translated the footage into a YouTube 360-degree clip. Adelaide Symphony is still exploring how to best make use of this technology, and I'll touch on that in an upcoming section on opportunities and challenges. Let's just have a look at some projection examples. This is Orchestra Victoria. And the project that they did back in 2009 was one of the first of its kind in the world. Orchestra Victoria did perform their concert in a regional town called Bendigo and transmitted it live by satellite to another regional town, Shepparton, and then also to a live site in the middle of the city of Melbourne. Apparently about some 5,000 people attended the Bendigo site. In 2015, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra collaborated with the Vienna Tourist Board to present Visions of Vienna, a concert inside the Sydney Opera House that was projected live onto the sails of the Opera House. It was also broadcast live on YouTube, and to date has had some 30,000 views. It also cost $300,000 to stage, which brings me to the last part of this presentation, opportunities and challenges. I took on this presentation because I realised how little I really knew about where our orchestras and our audiences are at with digital technology and social media. I am frankly amazed at where things are and genuinely excited about where it's all going. So, this is just the Adelaide Symphony's GoPro venture. So is it a gimmick, or will we be able to provide deeper engagement and enrichment by using it long term? The cost, reliability, and interestingly constant advances in digital technology do make planning, budgeting, and delivering performances quite a process. Not something to be undertaken lightly. Increasingly, orchestras are having to employ someone also to run the social media side of things. Our art form is under pressure from government belt tightening and a gradual reduction in music education, particularly in schools. To help address this, as performers, I believe we can no longer see our jobs as simply just playing our instruments. Educating our society and passing our craft on to the next generation is vital. Digital technology provides a major opportunity to do this. Lastly, audiences increasingly want an event and a stronger connection with their performers. Hardware such as virtual reality and projection technology can provide the event, social media the connection. We have to, as musicians, I believe, engage with digital technology, and by doing so, I am convinced this will make music making a richer experience for both performers and our audience, and secure our future. Yeah, so look, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to present this to you.
So, Barbara Haws.
Yes, hello. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here and to have been invited. I've been at the New York Philharmonic for nearly 35 years, and some of my most rewarding experiences have been working to find creative solutions with Bill Moriarty, who's a former president of Local 802 in the 90s, with Debbie Newmark, who's here today of the AFM. I'm really grateful for that opportunity. The Philharmonic's Orchestra Committee and players themselves have been staunch supporters of the archives and its mission because it is their individual and collective stories that we so carefully preserve. Although I manage a very lovely state-of-the-art archival repository that is filled with paper and audio tape, I genuinely believe that the real archives of the New York Philharmonic is sitting on stage. Our emphasis is not simply to document the eras of the great music directors who've come through the Philharmonic, from Mahler to Bernstein, etc., but to actually document the musicians and the relationships to one another and what has transferred from one musician to the next. And the archives is essential to that keeping of the memory. I should also like to say that first and foremost, I'm a historian. I'm not a musicologist. I am really not a musician. I studied flute all through high school, but when I got the job at the New York Philharmonic, my mother said, "Do they know you never practiced?" In fact, I'm an old-fashioned narrative historian, the kinds that like stories. I studied mainly urban history, and throughout my entire education, undergraduate and graduate, I took humanities and history courses, and never once did those classes mention the word symphonic orchestra. Not until I arrived at the New York Philharmonic did I realize how much I didn't know about the role of the symphony orchestra within our communities, within our history, within our past. And yet, nearly every symphony orchestra is known by the name of a place. It is grounded in a place, and yet when the stories or the history of that place are told, the symphony orchestra is usually excluded, at least in the United States. I think other countries do this better. So my approach to this music collection has been to understand and demonstrate how the symphony orchestra fits into and reflects its city, the economy, immigration, politics, business, technology, and the life of a musician. because stories are compelling. Stories attract people. They make one orchestra unique from the next and draw loyalty at the community level. And let's be realistic here, even though we're all going on the internet and we want to have 500,000, 1 million Facebook followers from all over the world, in the end, it's the local community that comes to our concerts. It's the local community that gives us money, that supports our mission. We can't really forget that. So how do we appeal to them? How do we drive them to us? How do we make them love us? History is a good business, and in many locations, the Symphony Orchestra is one of the oldest historic organizations in a community. And yet, rarely does the Symphony Orchestra reach out to the local historical society or the local historical society to the orchestra to try to find a way to work together and to really kind of revel in each other's stories. In New York City, domestic heritage tourism accounts to $8 billion a year. Every month, 68 million people around the world Google the word history. Ancestry.com makes $28 million a month from 1.7 million subscribers. The tiny town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania makes nearly $400 million annually from nearly 3 million visitors. So why don't orchestras tell their own compelling stories in addition to making great music? I would also like to say, as we all get online in some form or both, we need, again, as I said, something unique to say. So why does this have anything to do with this topic that we're talking about today is because I took the archives into the digital realm. When I arrived in the 1980s, I had one of the first PCs on my desk at the New York Philharmonic. We were using System 34s to control subscriptions and donor records. But with that PC, we started creating our data records, our databases. We started creating huge databases of all the performances of the New York Philharmonic. The New York Philharmonic has performed over 20,000 concerts since 1842. We have the largest string of data of any orchestra in the world. But that doesn't mean, and so in some ways that sets us out and you'd say, well, we can't do that. We don't have that much history. But all musicology is local. You all have a story within your own community that makes you different. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'd like to emphasize that as much as possible. I'd also like to emphasize that there are more people, as I think you can tell, that probably feel comfortable with history than feel comfortable with symphony orchestras. It's not with music in general, it's just that there is sometimes a barrier to get people to feel like they understand classical music in the form of what the orchestras play. And whereas there's this huge market for history. So maybe there's a way we can make our audiences and our communities feel comfortable with who we are by appealing to their sense and their love of, and maybe the ease of getting into it with history. And one example of this is that back in 2008, we wrote a grant to digitize our collections. At Philharmonic, we did an estimate that we have over 8 million pages of paper. We have over 7,000 hours of audio collections that go back to about 1913. And so the idea was, okay, let's start a plan to digitize this and make it available online to the best that we could. In the first proposal that we wrote, and it took a lot of modeling, it took a lot of starts and stops in doing all of this. But the funder, mainly because her real interest is in ancient world. She funds archaeological digs. She also likes music because her husband liked music, but that's not her passion. But because of the history side, she donated $2.5 million for us to start a digital archives project. Within 3 years, we had digitized nearly 1.5 million pages, all the entire Leonard Bernstein era, from 1943 to 1970, and made it available freely online. Now, we do have a lot of board members who think we should think about monetizing our collections, the latest word. How do you make the most out of that? I firmly believe that by making things freely available, it only helps to enhance the understanding and access to the symphony orchestra itself, to the New York Philharmonic, and so this is something that we have no firewalls against. You don't have to log in. It's freely available for you to do research. You can look at anything from how Leonard Bernstein marked his Mahler 6 score, to reading the complaint letters from the 1950s about Metropolis playing new music. It is all there. After a year, a hiatus of taking a break, we asked for another grant to go back, and she agreed again. The Leon Levy Foundation agreed to give us another $2.5 million to fund digitizing the entire collection from 1842 on up. That's not, I can't even believe that we've really been able to get that kind of support in many ways. But it's been interesting to see how approaching the humanities side of an orchestra, approaching the history side of an orchestra can be very appealing to certain people that maybe wouldn't have been as generous in that in general. As well, about 3 years ago, we applied for a grant to the National Endowment of Humanities for further digitization, and they came back and said, you should go to the NEA. You're digitizing too many scores. That's music. Undeterred, we decided to write an explanatory paragraph on 200 scores. We just selected 200 scores from our collection that went back into the 19th century to demonstrate what those scores said, whether it was the stamp of the music store, who used it, how it was bowed, how it highlighted, what it said about culture at that time. And we got $325,000 from a humanities agency for a symphony orchestra. So I think that not only does it maybe help at the level of appealing to the audience, but it also helps us in our outreach to large funding agencies to show that although it's great music on stage, it means so much to our entire community, and it says something about that as well. So I think we'll get into this a bit more as we go on, but it is easy for you to all see at the New York Philharmonic website. It says History and Archives, the top nav bar. Please go check it out. If you have any ideas, I'm always interested to hear how we can make it better or change some things or put something up you'd like to see. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, Mr. Heyneman. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. It's a great privilege to talk to you a little bit about what is happening down at the south point of Africa. I remember a couple of years ago at the same conference in Berlin, one of the presentations was about streaming. Now, Berlin was how many years ago? 2008. And streaming was quite a live streaming of a concert, apart from the Berlin Philharmonic. I thought, will we be ever there? And now it's a couple of years later, and we've done it. We're doing it. So it shows you we live in a very strange and interesting and exciting world where everything is turned on its top as far as communication and media concern, and the way we present the orchestra, your orchestra as part of the concert life in a city. I'm always worried that people will become so digital orientated, and that the live art, opera, music, and all forms of theater will be neglected. But in a way, I don't think so. The digital communication revolution has now finally reached the concert-going generation. How can symphony orchestras, and how should they embrace this digital technology? And I thought I'll start off by saying a little bit about cell phones, smartphones especially, and I will call it the symphony in your smartphone. 15 years ago, our audience profile was roughly the same as it is now. Mainly 40 plus, educated, sophisticated, affluent, artistically inclined, and open-minded. But the way we talk to, we as orchestra managers, talk to our audiences and to our musicians and to the community out there has changed drastically over the last decade, I would say. 15 years ago, smartphones did not rule our lives, and we've always said, oh, well, we can't really, we have to advertise in newspapers because our audience, say 50 plus, they don't have smartphones. They're never going to have smartphones. They don't want it to be part of their lives. Thank God, they won't bring it into the audience as well, into the theaters. But I'm afraid I was wrong. Now the whole world is available in the palm of your hand. YouTube has become the field of reference, musical reference, albeit totally arbitrary. You can see anything on YouTube. If I suddenly want to check the length of, before I program a work, I want to check the length, within seconds I know exactly how long that work is by checking it on YouTube. And then Facebook, for us, became a shortcut to both the private lives and the public communities, meandering through various levels of friends, friendships, followers, and professional musicians and connections. A decade ago, if I communicated with an artist in another, especially in another country, I would write an email. But often that artist would be in rehearsal or flying between two cities, and I would wait a couple of days for an answer. Nowadays, people are using their smartphones in a restaurant, waiting for a friend, on the airport, in a park, on a train, in their bedroom, hopefully not in the concert hall, yes. And I would get an answer within seconds because the notification that flashes on a smartphone, and basically my question was just a yes or a no. Are you available? We're planning something for November 2018. And within 30 seconds, I would get a very enthusiastic yes or sorry, I can't do it. So our lives have changed totally on the management side. As far as audiences concerned, it's exactly the same. Up to 60% of the same audience that we thought 10 or 15 years ago wouldn't be the smartphone generation. They have smartphones now, and their smartphones run their lives. They plan their meetings, and because if broadband is available all over the place, they text, pictures, videos. Sometimes they call people. They really talk to people as well. They organize their daily schedules. They confirm meetings. They do online bookings, online banking. They Google facts for information. However, have you been around a dinner table, and somebody asked a question and nobody knew the answer, or you think the answer is this, and somebody else thought, no, you've got it wrong, and you all grab your phone and you Google it to show who's right. So our lifestyles have become, or our smartphones have become part of our lifestyles. I've always had a belief in embrace change. We have symphony orchestras are almost an old-fashioned, beautiful, artistic endeavor. And how can we marry the beauties of the concert hall with modern technology? The CPO, Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra, also use contact with artists much easier now than 10 years ago. Cape Town is quite far off, so people come to Cape Town when they're not famous enough that we can't afford them, but they're on their way up. So, and once we build up a relationship, and I don't know whether there are any agents in this room, we always work through the agents initially, but then we build up a relationship through Facebook. And that artist, you following his life and he's following our lives. And it's very easy to get immediate answers from them. A decade ago, also a cell phone in the concert hall was a curse. We have notices in our programs, and sometimes we have a notice over the PA system, please switch off your cell phone. But I think soon we will have to embrace the modern technology as part of our concert life. Tweets and Facebook postings just before concerts and during the final ovation always pull a large community with you into the concert hall. One of my friends was this weekend at the Met and part of the 50th anniversary concert. And of course, all our Cape Town friends knew that he was there, and within minutes after the final curtain, we saw all the pictures stolen of the curtain calls. Why did he do that? He's a musician himself. He's telling the whole world, look where I've been. I've been in the Metropolitan Opera in New York. I've experienced one of the wonderful concerts of my life. I'm proud of it. I'm boasting. I want to show you as well. And it's worthwhile. It's something that I'm embracing, and I want you to embrace it as well. You know, in the 70s, the Louvre in Paris had to make a decision about cameras, allowing cameras into the Louvre Museum. So they could either ban each and every Japanese tourist and say, you're not allowed to bring your camera into this museum and take pictures inside. They rather decided that the Louvre was a brand. Let them bring in their cameras. No flash photography, because then they could make very high quality copies and sell it as postcards. But bring in your cameras, go and show the rest of the world. And that was long before the digital age. Go and show the rest of the world what the Louvre looks like inside and what wonderful things are in the Louvre. So it was an amazing brand building exercise. You still can go to Paris and you can still go into the museum and take pictures of whatever you like, as long as you don't use your flash. And it's still a wonderful branding exercise. Okay, it worked for them. We'll have to find a way to embrace the technology with either Facebook, with Instagram, with Twitter, and with all the other modern streaming to pull them into the concert halls. Our mission in Cape Town is, and our mission of the orchestra is an orchestra for all seasons. We play for ballet, we play for opera, we play all the light music concerts, we play all the symphony concerts. There's only one orchestra that can survive. Financially, it's quite difficult. So we have to, and my mandate in Cape Town is to keep an orchestra culture alive, a concert culture. We are very lucky for the last couple of years, with the help of very, very heavily social media backup and electronic newsletters, we have full halls. Our concert halls run to a capacity. Everybody wants to be there. A couple of years ago, one of the local radio stations asked me, can we broadcast your concerts live? I said, no, Cape Town is too small. If there's a crime situation in the evening, people don't really want to drive in the evening and park. They'll stay home and they listen to the concert at home. It did not happen. We had the opposite happening. we have full halls all the time, and we do the broadcasting. And the more we broadcast, the better our concerts getting, and the more difficult it is to supply tickets. So I think a decade ago we communicated with each other with text messages only. Now the whole community starts breathing and living together through the social media. Platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WeChat, Snapchat are all instant, and I don't think we should just say, oh, well, that's just the 20-year-olds. Let them play with their devices and let them have fun. We are more sophisticated. We go to symphony concerts, and we understand the deeper things of life. We actually have to embrace what they're doing as well. And it's interesting, in South Africa, who is a developing country, and we've got, there's a looming Venezuela in South Africa at the moment, with a lot of economic hardship coming up. 23 years after the democracy, I think the real bubble is about to burst. All South Africans are extremely unhappy and tense at the moment. And yet, with a population of 54 million people, there are 80 million cell phones in South Africa. 54 million, 80 million cell phones, and with a penetration, a smartphone penetration of between 37 and 45%. Now, just make the mathematics of that. People aspire to be part of a Facebook or an international culture. Perhaps you can't afford a car, you can't afford a new house, but you can afford a smartphone. So, yes, we have concerts with big screen, but I don't think the marry you can, once every 3 or 4 years, you can do the planets by host with a big screen and a cosmic, interesting a screen behind it. But that's a sort of a bastard art size that is a gimmick, a once-off gimmick. You can't do it all the time. A symphony concert is abstract music. And so we have to find a way with streaming or with marketing, newsletters, what have you, to make the whole community, and especially the youngsters, to make them eventually part of this wave of culture that's a global culture. By the way, Cape Town has a very good opera school. Many of the young black opera singers perform first time with us, are performing all over the world now. Last year we presented the first time out of Europe, we presented the Belvedere International Singing Competition. Many of our Cape Town singers won that competition or came second in the last couple of years. Pretty Yende, who is one of the stars at the Metropolitan now, started a career with us. There's a lot of potential, and the fact that you grew up in a township in Africa does not mean that classical music and the international world of good quality music can't be part of your DNA. Those days are over. So I see a great future between the serious arts and the art and the digital world. We have to make that connection. I'm not sure how, but it will come and it will be natural. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heyneman. Now we have Gerald Mertens.
Well, thank you. I just want to refer on the headlines which are printed in the program. Artistic audience A, B, backstage box office, C, communication, D, diffusion, dissemination, distribution, and E, education. So I want to link to these 5 headlines of the session. And I will be a little bit quick to make it short. And I will refer a little bit to the Berlin Phil rather often. So the Berlin Phil Digital Concert Hall started in December 2008. It was the year when we had the first ever international orchestra conference in Berlin. And I remember the critics saying, oh, will this work? And we have had a guy from the Lahti Symphony and the ever first conference in Berlin, which you mentioned earlier. And he told us, yes, we are very far ahead. We are doing live performances and live streams from Lahti Symphony. And I met him 2 years earlier and said, oh, we were the first ones, but we were not fast enough. So I think we are in a very fast running machine, and it's rather hard to adopt with the speed of this machine. And I think Rob told us a little bit about how fast the development is going on. And it's really hard to calculate the investments you have to do in this digital process. So the Berlin Phil started in December 2008, and today they have 30,000 paying subscribers, 30,000 annual paying subscribers, and they have 850,000 registered users. So this is really a lot of people watching or being linked to the digital concert hall of the Berlin Philharmonic. And there are other orchestras, you know, the Detroit Symphony, which has copied it a little bit, but has a complete different model. We have the Bavarian State Opera having some 9 performances, live screened and live webcast online. And we have another Frankfurt Radio Symphony. If you go on YouTube and look for the Frankfurt Radio Symphony, which is a publicly funded radio orchestra in Germany, their YouTube channel has some 50,000 subscribers, which is quite a lot. And if you look for a Schumann piano concerto on this channel, it got 3.9 million clicks in 4 years. This is not nothing. So there's a lot of development in this point. So if we look to the backstage and box office issues, so this is a little bit tricky because in Germany we are a little bit behind schedule. Only 40 to 50% of music theaters and orchestras offer online tickets. So there is a lot work to do. And a problem which we have in Germany, you won't have that in the US, I guess, that the ticketing service providers. So if you do it, you do it not by yourself. You have a provider. We have a great provider like Event Team, which is a great provider in Germany and Europe. They don't deliver the collected data to you. So it's rather strange. If you do consumer relationship management, you need this data. But in Germany, okay, this data belong to the service company, not to you. So this is rather bad system if you want to reach out to your customers. And backstage, we have seen it from Australia. We have some backstage programs. You all from the US know OPAS, Orchestra Planning Administration System, which is in use in Germany for 41 orchestras. We have TEASoft, which is especially for theaters, used by 78 music theaters and theaters. And we have EVIS, which is a event software, which is used by 25 companies. So I think this is working quite well to use digital technology at the box office or more backstage. If you look to see communication, social networks, again, the Berlin Phil. The Berlin Phil has got some 1.1 million followers and friends on Facebook. They have 118,000 followers on Twitter, and they have 49,000 subscribers on Instagram. They don't do any Snapchat, so it's very different how to use these channels. If you look the Munich Phil, which is a huge German orchestra in Munich, they only have 22,000 followers on Facebook. Only 22,000. So there's a huge gap between even big orchestras in the use of digital media. And what I want to show, the Berlin Phil, they have a very short mission. They have a mission which says 128 soloists, one orchestra. I think this is the shortest mission you can give to an orchestra, and it's very fitting to the Berlin Phil. And every musician understands itself as an ambassador of its orchestra. It's not only the management, it's every single musician understands himself or herself as an ambassador. And they use digital media. For example, Sarah Willis, the beautiful and very sympathetic horn player of the Berlin Phil, has her own TV show on Deutsche Welle. So she promotes via TV, like BBC World, on Deutsche Welle, her ideas and her passion for classical music as an ambassador of her horn group, of course, and as an ambassador of her orchestra. So this is a really good example for how to use digital media for the single musicians. As we got further to the distribution, I sum up a little bit because we had several points from Rob former. I think the classical music lovers still buy CDs, especially in Germany. So it's a conservative audience, and they still buy the CD, but they are older than 50 years per average. And Berlin Phil started its own recording series. So they said goodbye to Universal, said goodbye to Deutsche Grammophon. They did their own recording series in 2014. They make it on CD, they make it on Blu-ray, and even, believe it or not, on vinyl. So the old black plates you put on your record set, they are coming back in Germany to the very high-end connoisseurs. So this is a new development which is an old development at least, which is very interesting to me. If we come up to education, to my observation, it's upload and download of theoretical stuff for your music education, for teachers, for students. This is a very good use of digital content and digital distribution. But the education itself always needs live music and live action. It needs the single musician in a classroom, the single musician in a kindergarten. What is very interesting from Australia, which I've seen on the screen, is your example on long-distance lessons for students who are 100 kilometers away. I think this is a very good example how it can be used too. So if I put it together, the digital communication doesn't substitute the physical communication to our local audiences, as we heard several times this day. Season brochures, leaflets, posters, concert announcement, printed adverts in newspapers and magazines remain to be important. The Berlin Phil, every 2 months, they have a printed brochure in our daily newspapers, and it's published for the local audiences. Just read it, go online. So I think this relation between printed devices and online devices will remain. Further point, digital communication helps to development world brands, similar as the Berlin Philharmonic. So if the Berlin Philharmonic is down at the Antipodes, of course they have an audience there because, 1.1 million followers on Facebook, there are some from Australia and New Zealand. Or if they go to Japan or Korea or wherever. So they have followers around the globe. And so this world branding for the Berlin Phil is a very good way to attract audiences when they are on tour in Asia or in Australia or wherever. To sum up, firstly, the use of digital media enlarges audiences for orchestras and spreads classical music across the globe. This is further clear. Secondly, however, every orchestra has to find its own perfectly fitting digital media and marketing strategy. And thirdly, digital media development has to be part of strategic marketing. I strongly believe that this is not only a management business. A sustainable business model has to involve musicians to be successful And believe it or not, the digital concert hall is run by musicians. It's not run by the management of the Berlin Phil. So the idea to install this digital concert hall in December 2008 was the idea of the solo cellist who was board of musicians. And he is the CEO of this digital media company, not the manager of the Berlin Phil. So I think it's a little bit, as we heard in the previous session, a little bit a mixture about a self-governing orchestra business model in this digital context, especially with the Berlin Phil, and the public-funded foundation of the Berlin Phil. So this is very tricky to figure this out. And last point, in many orchestras, there is a lack of transparency and of long-term strategic development. They're looking for the next season, they're looking for the next 2 seasons, but I think due to this context, we have to look far more in advance for 5 years or even longer. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot of interesting information. And I hope you take notes because there was a lot to listen and learn. And this is many interesting issues were raised, and don't worry, we will have a question time in a few minutes. But Barbara, you raised the issue of preserving history and archives and digitizing as many you can. And I find it interesting because in fact the documentation about the history was available, it wasn't the first thing that was on the internet, you know, history, encyclopedias and stuff like that. But about music, what the thing that fascinated me with YouTube at first was discovering all this historic stuff that we could never see before, you know. And so, did you find that all to make available to the community all this stuff and all these great moments of history had a big impact on the marketing, marketing and development?
Well, most of the historic performance material on YouTube has been put up by others. Yeah. Not so much by us. The Philharmonic has a very robust YouTube channel where we are putting up not only our excerpts from our performances, but then our own. We do a lot of interviews and videos with the musicians themselves, like how to play the trombone, this sort of thing. Then they'll put that up to bring kind of closer identification with the musicians in the orchestra today. Our project was about the paper side of this, which is not usually what people think about when they think about the history of or the past of the symphony orchestra. So, for instance, we put up all of Leonard Bernstein's Mark conducting scores, and the Bernstein's Mahler 6th score has been viewed over 25,000 times, and it's studied then in music classes around the world. Just the sheer number of being able to accommodate that kind of viewing of a single piece of paper would mean that it would turn to dust. So not only is it made more widely available, it's also preserving the material itself then for another time. But I found the most interesting side to putting this material up is it shows the connections between everything. So not only can you, probably on YouTube, you can find Leonard Bernstein's conducting debut from 1943, but then our site, you find the actual score of the Schumann Manfred that he used at that very same performance. Plus then we have parts from the Schumann Manfred that the orchestra musicians used. So as a viewer, you can kind of sit in you can see the program that you would have been given if you walked in the hall. You can see the score that the conductor used, and you can see the, first clarinet's part on what they actually saw and what they used when they were playing this work. So it's this different experience of showing all the sides of a symphony orchestra in this case. I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
and even more. About the social networks, especially Facebook, because now even Facebook is becoming a sort of broadcaster by itself. Like last night, the concert was streaming on Facebook, the piano competitions. But Mark, your experience was as a musician using the social networks, not as management. That's an important difference. And so you use it to involve the musicians in reaching new audiences. So was it easy to convince your colleagues to go on Facebook and promote the music in the orchestra?
I was pleasantly surprised that most people jumped at it at the time. There was streaming from the Sydney Opera House. Look, we didn't have problems getting players to engage with using it. I think where people were particularly interested in engaging was in the video conferencing, and doing that, being able to give those masterclasses before, to regional areas around the country. And that's where we virtually had a queue of musicians wanting to do that. I think we, as performers, we inherently get that, and we inherently know that we have to do that. And in a lot of ways, as performers, it is our duty to pass that craft on to the next generations. And I think that through being able to do video conferencing, or in the Australian Chamber Orchestra's case, they did the virtual reality version of that, with a very large grant to do it too. But that just gives a huge range of opportunities for performers to take their experience at work to a whole new level. And just brings in players from all sorts of regional areas, that we don't even know are out there, but gives them an opportunity to be engaged with.
Thank you. So it seems to me that a great opportunity for the musicians themselves to connect with the community. And then when the community connect with the artists themselves, it's easier to promote the music and the orchestras. I think that's something that is quite new since maybe the social networks and the internet. I think that Louis is interested by this topic.
I'm quite fascinated by it. A couple of weeks ago was International Piano Day. I didn't even know there was a day like that. And a Cape Town company took a Steinway grand piano onto the top of Table Mountain. And I personally took a video of 4 of my friends, pianist friends of Cape Town, and who played just some arrangements of Happy Birthday and a couple of other things for 8 hands on one piano. They didn't really fit, but they played. And that video I put on Facebook straight away right there, and it was viewed 107,000 times within a day or two. 107,000 times. And for Cape Town, that's a lot. And that's a community that's suddenly become part of Cape Town. the music scene in Cape Town. That had nothing to do with the orchestra, but they were just my friends, and they're all concert pianists that usually regularly perform with the orchestra in Cape Town. But it shows you the power of something like Facebook, and Facebook is not a musical platform, it's just a journal platform. But in a way, people were so inspired to see something as simple as that. And I believe that you win people over for classical music. It was well played, and it was a very nice arrangement. And everybody listened through that 2-minute video, got something from it, and maybe they will become potential music lovers and potential audience members.
Yeah, thank you. We are officially breaking the 85 minutes barrier soon, but we can extend another 3 or 4 minutes, so we'll eat faster. So, Mr. Mertens, you talked about the digital concert hall. And after that, the questions about the digital concert hall. But what about, and there was a point at the moment about preserving the live experience. And there's a delicate balance between preserving the live experience and selling tickets and showing the music everywhere in the world for almost free or for a small subscription.
Well, the Berlin Phil has a luxury problem because the concerts are almost sold out. So enlarging it and live transmission in the digital concert hall enlarges the audience to, 30,000 subscribers, and don't believe that they are sitting alone in Korea or Japan. They're inviting friends, so there may be 10 or 15 people watching this concert with Simon Rattle from the Berlin Phil in the same moment. So I think the strategy which the Berlin Phil developed, and you never know if it happens and if it works. And there were critics saying, "Oh, this won't work," as I mentioned earlier. But they had the passion. And they really believed in this model, and they had to reframe it. And so I think if you have a fully booked concert hall, and then you have the possibility to do it online, like the Berlin Phil does, and to earn money with it, they are earning money now. So Breughel was with some 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers. Now they have 30,000, so really earn money from this. And this is a business model. But this is very unique. And I don't know if other orchestras, I think the New York Phil is another world brand, of course, and there may be some other orchestras which are world brands and that can do in a similar way. But I don't know how many digital concert halls can we really promote around the globe. Is it 10, is it 15, is it 200? I don't know. So I think it is a way, but you have always to remodel your business model. I think it works for now, but I don't know if it works in 5 years or in 10 years. So you have always to reframe it, to rethink it. And the Berlin Phil guys from the orchestra are very tricky guys. They work together with Panasonic to get the investment on a new HD +++ studio. So you have to be you have to take the technology, which is very fast. And if you go into a media market and you see the new TVs, which are really large, and have this round scenes, this is another new technology. And so you have to adopt your cameras, you have to adopt your computers, etc., etc. It's a huge investment. You have to find sponsors therefore. But if you are a world brand, it's easier, of course, to find sponsors therefore. So I think this is a very good point. And if the hall is full, it's wonderful if another 100,000 can watch it online.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have the microphone is available for questions. Try to be as brief as you can.
I'll do that. Horace Trowbridge, British Musicians Union. Very pleased to be in Montreal. Very nice beer. It's always a good sign of a good city, good beer. So things ain't what they used to be. And that's because fangs ain't what they used to be. Now stay with me here. I know you think Horace has lost it, but fangs is smart speak. It's an acronym for Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Now, you've spoken a lot about how you use these things to publicize what you do. But there hasn't been so much talk about how you monetize these fangs. And that's what I'd like to hear more of. I mean, for instance, do you know of any orchestra that is, for instance, a YouTube partner? YouTube, as we know, makes millions and squillions and billions from adverts, whether it's raised nasal spray, or in my case, fishing gear. They make a lot of money from all these adverts they carry. And people who have multiple hits on stuff they put on YouTube become YouTube partners. And they make money from that. Nowhere near as much money as they should make, but they do make money from it. So my question to you is, do you know of orchestras anywhere in the world who are YouTube partners, who are sharing in some of the ad revenue that YouTube rakes in every second?
The cruel answer is no. In fact, most of the material on YouTube are put up there by private individuals. They either steal it, or they just take it, or they just put it out there, or they have it in their possession. And there are no particular laws that I know of that can prevent them from doing it. Sometimes I do know that record companies remove stuff. But they have to challenge first, and they have to spend a lot of money to challenge another company to take it off. And sometimes you see things are removed because of certain copyright laws. But if it's not a complete work, or it's old historic work, there is very little control at the moment. And unfortunately, orchestras are losing out badly.
Thank you.
But on the other hand, we're a very small universe compared to who's making money out there on YouTube. I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's our future at all, is to try to get pennies out of Spotify, out of Amazon, or these things, because who makes money out of those are the people that get millions of hits on those. What do we have to do, run kitties across our stages?
I hear what you're saying, but if a piano on the top of Table Mountain can get over 100,000 hits, then there is money to be made.
It's
and
2 minutes.
you know, it's for orchestras to become YouTube partners. It really is.
I'm skeptical.
Okay, just
Yeah, hi.
Maybe there,
I'm Claire Farr. I play trombone with the Norwegian Radio Orchestra. I'm also responsible for all their social media. I do all the Facebook and Instagram accounts. We're a licensed orchestra. I have 2 questions. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do. Our motto is that we're the nation's orchestra, and we find that social media is actually the easiest and best way to reach people who don't have a tradition of listening to orchestral music at all. We spend a lot of time putting out things about the musicians. The musicians run the account. We have competitions. We find that the informal atmosphere of Facebook really diffuses the myths of classical music, and we appreciate that. We also, being part of the Norwegian broadcasting, get a lot of fun facts and figures. For example, 85% of Facebook videos are watched without sound. Which is a problem if you're an orchestra. It means that we text everything we put out, and we always have a link to the NRK webpage so that people can actually listen to our music. But my questions are, we've been thinking about using Facebook Live if we overcome the copyright things, and I know that the New York Philharmonic do use Facebook Live for orchestras, so I'm wondering if there is any difference. Do people actually click on orchestral concerts that are sent directly to Facebook? And if so, how have you overcome the copyright laws for this?
Our opening night this year was our first Facebook Live concert. It had a huge response, much bigger than we expected. I think that Dvorak's New World Symphony isn't under copyright, so that was fairly simple for us. I'm sure we paid rights on the Gershwin Piano Concerto, and the musicians, because it was streamed. In that case, they also were involved in whatever the rights are for that ability to have on that in that format. But it did prove to be incredibly useful, and people stayed on it much longer than was expected. And it seemed to be the live part of it played something into that, and the fact that they could respond. You know, that if they liked the way the melody was, they could actually, you know, interact with it. And that's something that you can't do on YouTube. So that was a very interesting sort of discovery in this, of the kind of value of Facebook Live and allowing people to make comments right away, good or bad. So.
Interesting. Two more questions. So, sir, and then...
Okay. I like very much this panel as well as the other one before, because you know all these digital instruments that finally are going into the orchestras is really what we need. I have read a little bit about your country and as a matter of fact, I thought they're really extravagant. They do it big, you know, like $100,000 for an stage is, you know, it's a lot for a concert, and. I thought you work with the New York. It's incredible. When I read here, I thought you were actually the person that put you know, every part in every stand, and I know you are much more than that. But yeah no no but it's very important because you know one is missing. It's a loss of time and money. But you know that made me think of one digital. Invention that, you know, I'm sure many people have had the idea before, so I don't care. You know, if anybody wants to take it and do it, go patent and make lots of money. It's urgently to have cyber stands, you know, a cyber stand, you know, with the screen, two pedals, one left, one right, because that also, you know, for composers, it gives us freedom, you know, because sometimes you always have to take care of it. No, where's going to be the turn, you know, but no, I want him to keep on playing, you know, and then it's either or kind of good music or a good part. So that's one thing that, you know, it would be very, very, very good. And the other is also for the timpanis. And the timpanis, I was studying some piece yesterday, well, no, a couple of days ago in Sofia with this specialist, and I wanted some notes, but it was really, really difficult unless we had two sets of timpanis. But that makes it more expensive, and you know, you always have to. So the thing is to make this digital timpani, you know, that you can just move with a click and you can go and have much more notes, you know, well, what I want to say is, if you can make all this thinking, this digital thinking for the orchestras, along with keep on going with the development of the instruments and everything that we use, then I think we are in the right path, you know, because it's a matter of thinking big. We need to think big, because otherwise, you know, we will not make it.
Digital stands will come around, and that, yes.
Can I just tell you that very often I see accompanists for singers or soloists play from an iPad. I get so nervous and I watch their feet. When are they going to turn? When are they going to turn? It's for me distractive. They do it very well, mind you, but I guess soon, and I know Siemens have designed a system where everybody plays, but if something goes offline, the whole orchestra stops, I'm afraid.
That's great.
One last question.
Thank you.
And
I'll be
then it'll
brief.
sum up.
The BBC, as one of the biggest, most famous broadcasters on the planet, we get our charter renewed every 10 years. In 1996, in the charter given to us by the government, the charter, there was no mention in 1996 of either internet technology or the mobile phone technology. That's how far we've come. I was just going to say very briefly about what part of the title of this panel was to do with education. And you can Google this, so I won't bore you with it, but just Google BBC 10 pieces. The BBC decided 2 years ago that it wanted every single child between the age of 7 and 14 to experience live classical music. So it founded a project called 10 Pieces. 10 Pieces involves all the BBC orchestras, it's online, it's in concert halls, so every single child in the United Kingdom has access to live classical music. And we've achieved it, and it's been so successful, we're now doing 10 Pieces secondary. They're excerpts of 10 of the most famous pieces of music, like Beethoven's 5, bits of Enigma variations, the planets, things like that, easily accessible, presented. We do interactive stuff. People like Nicola Benedetti are doing interactive stuff on the internet. And the idea was to open up classical music to a new generation. So I won't bore you with it. You can just Google it yourselves. Thank you very much.
Okay, now it's the brief sum up by each panelist. We begin with Mark.
Look, I think digital technology certainly does provide a great opportunity to build new audiences and therefore certainly help secure our future. But we do have to be careful. As can happen with sound engineers and acousticians and people like that, we must be careful not to lose control of what we're doing. But in education and the big one, I think this one is with an integrated and ongoing programs, not just sort of one-off strikes, with schools and universities. I think that's where our real potential is.
I think we're at a very exciting time in orchestras, in the orchestra world, and with technological development. It's about the same time, I think, as we were in the at the advent of radio and early recordings, where there was a great deal of fear and apprehension about what that was going to do to our work and our model, and yet all it did was create more and more fans and greater popularity. And I think that this is where it's going as well. It's going to be a painful road. It's not going to be easy, but I think it has only the potential of catapulting us even beyond what we know today.
I'm waiting for the first hologram orchestra, Beam Me Down, Scotty. But I also think the further we move away from who we are, the fact of live music, the fact that we're human beings that want to see and feel and being emotional to music, the further the danger is that music will just become another commodity. I hope that whatever the future holds for us, and that we will find that fine balance between the technological advance and wonderful things and the pure art and enjoyment of live music. That's very important.
Well, I just wanted to point out that the biggest challenge to create fair income streams for the producers, the orchestra funds, and of course for the musicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it was what I realized now is that we live in a very interesting and challenging world, and it's better to be on top and to create the trend that try to follow the trend. So thank you very much for everything, everyone. Thank you.
Mesdames et